Alright, what's up family? Strat here from Strategic Audio once again. Today's video is going to be a little bit different from my previous stuff. I'm going to be going through the process of taking a piece of music and transforming it using sampling to make a 90s style old school boom bap type beat. Now if this sounds like something you can appreciate, please click like and subscribe if you're so inclined. It really does mean a whole lot to me. Now, the sample I'll be working with today is one of my own original soul compositions. Let me play that for you right now. The tempo of this composition is 80 BPM and the key is G sharp minor or alternately A flat minor. So it's one of my original pieces and I think it's very musical and melodic. It's inspired by and meant to emulate the soul and R&B records of the 60s and 70s. So you would have heard the sample contains strings and vocals that are very prominent. I think these help give the piece a lot of emotion. There is also piano, of course, and bass, and these provide the fundamental chord structure for this composition. As you probably know, old school boom bap, 90s boom bap for sure, was built on a foundation of chopping up old records, especially old records from the 60s and 70s. And that's kind of what I was going for with this particular project. The major difference in this case, and this is true for when you're using loops and samples from good sample makers, such as myself, is that you don't have to worry about copyright issues or any stressful sample clearance processes. Alright, so now on to the actual sample flip. First thing I did was throw it into Serato sample and pitched it down 2 semitones to F sharp minor. There's no technical reason why, I just felt like I wanted to change the pitch and I thought it sounded good in F sharp minor. In terms of tempo, I'm intending to make a kind of a 90s style boom bap beat, so the tempo I chose is 87. So Serato makes slicing your samples fairly simple. You can basically just use this drop down menu here, set it to set slicer and click it, and it will slice the sample up for you just like how you see it has done here. Down here where you see this number 2, you can either decrease or increase that, and that will change the size of the chops. Of course, if you need to, you can always zoom in like this and manually make small adjustments to your chops. Now with the chops done, these little squares down here are populated, and I can play these chops across my keys or the pads on my controller. Alright, so now I'm going to play you the actual sample flip that I came up with. This is, in my view, a very tried and tested sampling technique. Essentially, what it boils down to is rearranging the chops of the sample and playing them in a new order that makes musical sense. It could be whatever sounds good to you and fits the style that you're going for. You should also take care to make the start and the end of each chop as smooth as possible because you want them to run together without any little artifacts or things that sound like they're bleeding over, or the chopped off end of one or the chopped off beginning of the other. That might detract from the smoothness of the overall loop. So I found this sequence literally by just messing around playing the various chops on the keys, and once I figured out that that's what I wanted, I hit record and I played it. So as I mentioned, I think this is a very traditional, tried, tested technique of taking various chops from a sample, rearranging them, and playing them in a different order. That's been a staple of hip hop for as far back as I can remember. Now, another technique I used on this project is layering. I added 2 extra melodic layers on top of this sample. One is this live guitar that I played. The other is this really simple piano phrase, I suppose you could call it, that I played using Piano Tech 8, of course. Alright, so check this out. Now the original sample, the original composition has a bass line in it. Let me play it back so you can hear. Even though the sample has its own bass, I wanted to isolate out that bass and put it in its own mixer track so that I can process it separately from the rest of the sample. Now what I like to do is select the pattern that has my chops, which would be this one here, and render that as an audio clip. Then I'm going to place that audio in the timeline and give it its own mixer track. So essentially the audio is an exact duplicate of the chops that I made, but I can take the audio duplicate and EQ everything out except the bass, and then process it with other plugins as heavily or as light as I want. Just as an example, here's the audio layer just after I duplicated it. And here's that same layer with everything processed out except the bass. Then what I did with my original sample chops, I filtered out the bass as much as possible so it still sounds natural. Now when I play these 2 tracks together, you get a bigger boom from the bass than if I had just kept the bass on the original sample. One more quick thing about the main sample chops before I move on to anything else. Because of how this original composition is structured, I was able to take the same sequence of chops, the same MIDI, and apply it to a part of the sample, the composition a bit further down that didn't have the strings playing. Same chords, same bass and piano, but it didn't have the strings. This part I used for the verse section of the beat. Let me play that for you. I wanted to give the beat some variation. I often don't like to have a beat that just plays the exact same loop over and over and over. And so what I did is I found a different sequence of chops altogether that still made musical sense with the original and used that as a switch up in the beat. Here's what that sounds like. Of course, with this one, I went through the same process as I did with the first one to get the bass to be more full. By the way, I actually did this process a 3rd time, with the exception of the bass part, because I wanted to create an intro. And I didn't want the bass in the intro, but I found a 3rd set of chops to use as an intro. Here's what that sounds like. This one was simple. It's really just the original sample with some slices to give it a bit of bounce. Alright, so now let's compare the original with the flip one more time. Alright, now, so let's pull all of these results together and see what the final beat sounds like after adding drums and doing the mixing and the mastering and all of that good stuff. Funny thing is, right, so this beat is actually posted on one of my websites, essentially the beat selling website that I have, and it's posted on my Type Beat channel. I guess I'll link them in the description. But the reason I'm laughing is I gotta give you full disclosure. I am really bad at running my Type Beat channel. Really bad. But anyway, I'll still link it in the description in case you got an artist friend that you might want to, send a link to, whatever. I'm also going to leave a link to one of my new free loop kits. It's called All In. The sample I flipped for this beat, for this project, is included in that kit. The name of the sample, I believe, is Fundamentals. You'll find that along with 7 other samples in the same style, same genre, along with all the stems. Thank you so much for watching, especially if you made it this far, basically right to the end. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I see you in the next video.